The 1970s delivered sci-fi thrillers that didn't just shock audiences, they rewrote the genre's DNA with revolutionary twists that nobody saw coming. These 5 groundbreaking films combined cutting-edge innovation with mind-bending revelations that still influence filmmakers today. Let's count down cinema's most game-changing psychological thrillers.
Shut down. Shut down immediately.
5. Westworld, 1973. Michael Crichton's directorial debut arrived at the perfect moment in cinema history. With a modest budget of just $1.25 million, this sci-fi thriller would go on to earn over $7 million after its re-release, proving that innovative concepts could triumph over big-budget spectacle. The film emerged during the early 70s golden age of dystopian cinema, sharing shelf space with Soylent Green and Logan's Run. But Crichton had something different in mind. The story itself was born from a surprisingly mundane experience: Crichton's visit to Disneyland, where he became both fascinated and terrified by the hyper-realistic animatronics in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. This sparked an idea that would fundamentally change how we think about artificial intelligence in cinema. Westworld presents Delos, a luxury resort offering 3 themed worlds, where wealthy guests can live out their fantasies among lifelike robots programmed to fulfill every desire. What made Westworld revolutionary wasn't just its premise, but its execution. The film became the first feature to use computer-generated imagery, employing digital effects to show the gunslinger's pixelated point of view. Each 10 seconds of this groundbreaking footage required 8 hours to produce, a technical achievement that seems quaint now, but was absolutely cutting-edge for 1973. The mind-bending twist hits when the park's carefully programmed robots begin malfunctioning, developing memories they shouldn't possess, and hunting the very guests they were designed to serve. Yul Brynner's relentless gunslinger became an instant icon of unstoppable artificial menace, pursuing terrified vacationers through a paradise-turned-nightmare. The horror comes not from jump scares, but from the slow realization that humanity's greatest creation has become its greatest threat. Crichton's genius lay in recognizing that our technological ambitions often outpace our ability to control them, a theme he'd later explore in Jurassic Park. The film tapped into growing anxieties about automation and corporate power while delivering edge-of-your-seat thrills. The cultural impact has been enormous. James Cameron openly acknowledged Westworld as a direct influence on The Terminator, particularly Brynner's relentless, emotionless pursuit sequences. The concept has proven so enduring that HBO's 2016 series became one of television's most acclaimed sci-fi dramas, expanding Crichton's vision into complex explorations of consciousness and free will. Westworld succeeded because it grounded its high-concept premise in recognizable human desires, the fantasy of consequence-free indulgence. When that fantasy turns deadly, the film forces audiences to confront uncomfortable questions about power, control, and what we really want from our entertainments. Nearly 50 years later, as we grapple with increasingly sophisticated AI, Crichton's warning about the dangers of playing God feels more relevant than ever.
Files corrupted. Deleting vacuuming function.
The Steepford Wives, 1975, Brian Forbes' adaptation of Ira Levin's chilling novel, arrived during one of the most politically charged periods in American history. With feminism reshaping society and traditional gender roles under fierce debate, The Steepford Wives struck a nerve that reverberates to this day. Made for an undisclosed budget, the film earned $4 million at the box office, modest numbers that belied its massive cultural impact. The production itself was fraught with creative tensions that ironically enhanced the film's themes. Screenwriter William Goldman clashed with director Forbes over casting and tone, particularly when Forbes cast his own wife, Nanette Newman, as one of the eerily perfect wives. Goldman had envisioned Playboy bunny-type robots, but Forbes opted for a more unsettling approach: women who looked like idealized 1950s housewives, complete with prairie dresses and frilly aprons. The genius of The Steepford Wives lies in its deceptively sunny presentation. Unlike most horror films that rely on darkness and gothic atmosphere, this nightmare unfolds in bright suburban sunlight among manicured lawns and cheerful dinner parties. The horror creeps in slowly as photographer Joanna Eberhardt notices something fundamentally wrong with the women of Stepford. They're all impossibly beautiful, obsessed with housework, and completely devoid of individual personality. The mind-bending revelation that these women have been murdered and replaced by submissive robots hits like a sledgehammer. The film's most terrifying moment comes when Joanna discovers her own robotic duplicate, complete with enlarged breasts and vacant black eyes. It's a visceral representation of how men might improve their wives if given the chance, a concept so disturbing that many viewers still find it unwatchable. The film's reception was divisive from day one. Feminist leader Betty Friedan stormed out of a screening, calling it a rip-off of the women's movement. Others recognized it as a savage satire of male fears about female liberation. The controversy reached such heights that director Forbes was reportedly attacked with an umbrella by an angry viewer. The Steepford Wives proved remarkably prescient in its themes. The phrase Steepford wife entered common usage as shorthand for mindless female conformity. More significantly, the film's exploration of identity replacement and social control would influence decades of thriller cinema. Jordan Peele specifically cited it as a key influence on Get Out, recognizing how the film used body horror to examine social oppression. The 2004 remake starring Nicole Kidman completely missed the point, turning the material into broad comedy and undermining its feminist critique. This only reinforced the original's power, its willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about gender dynamics and male anxiety. Today, The Steepford Wives reads as both a product of its time and a timeless warning about the dangers of trying to control those we claim to love.
Consider the execution of this maneuver. In order to explode the generator, they had to create a living chain.
Listen, Hubs, those people are dead. Don't you understand?
Third, FaZe Fufur, 1974. Saul Bass made his reputation creating some of cinema's most iconic title sequences for films like Psycho, North by Northwest, and Anatomy of a Murder. But in 1974, the legendary graphic designer stepped behind the camera for his one and only feature film, a mind-bending thriller that remains one of science fiction's most underappreciated masterpieces. With a modest budget that forced creativity over spectacle, FaZe Fufur tells the story of super-intelligent ants that develop collective consciousness and begin systematically challenging human dominance. The premise sounds like B-movie schlock, but Bass approached the material with the artistic sensibility that made his title work legendary. Using revolutionary macro photography techniques, he transformed common desert ants into alien creatures whose behavior grows increasingly sophisticated and menacing. The film's brilliance lies in its restraint. Rather than relying on traditional monster movie tactics, Bass builds tension through observation and implication. Scientists Nigel Davenport and Michael Murphy find themselves trapped in a research station surrounded by increasingly organized ant colonies. The insects begin displaying coordinated behavior, geometric construction patterns, and most unnervingly, apparent attempts at communication. The mind-bending twist unfolds gradually. These aren't just mutated ants, but representatives of an entirely new form of intelligence that views humanity as an evolutionary dead end. The film suggests that consciousness and civilization might take forms completely alien to human understanding. Bass presents this through stunning visual sequences that blend abstract art with nature documentary, creating something that feels both scientifically plausible and completely otherworldly. What made FaZe Fufur revolutionary was its commitment to non-anthropomorphic storytelling. Unlike most creature features that simply make animals behave like angry humans, Bass imagined what genuinely alien intelligence might look like. The ants developed their own aesthetic sensibilities, building elaborate crystalline structures and conducting experiments on human behavior with the same clinical detachment scientists show toward lab rats. The film's original ending was even more abstract, a psychedelic sequence showing humans and ants achieving some form of symbiotic evolution. Studio executives found it too experimental and imposed a more conventional conclusion, but even the theatrical cut maintains Bass's uncompromising vision of intelligence transcending species boundaries. FaZe Fufur found its audience slowly, becoming a cult classic among science fiction enthusiasts who appreciated its unique approach to first contact scenarios. The film influenced later Nature Strikes Back thrillers and demonstrated that science fiction's greatest power lay not in explosions and laser battles, but in forcing audiences to question their assumptions about consciousness, intelligence, and humanity's place in the natural order. Nearly 50 years later, as we grapple with artificial intelligence and environmental collapse, Bass's vision of non-human intelligence feels prophetic rather than fantastical.
These people were killed, and whoever killed them is going to try to kill me. Austin Tucker thinks so too.
2. The Parallax View, 1974. Alan J. Pakula's paranoid masterpiece arrived at the perfect cultural moment, just as Watergate was unraveling American faith in government institutions. With a $3 million budget, the film earned a modest $5.3 million, but its influence on political thrillers proved immeasurable. Warren Beatty stars as journalist Joe Frady, investigating a shadowy organization that may be behind a series of political assassinations. The film opens with a shocking public murder at Seattle's Space Needle, immediately establishing an atmosphere of pervasive dread. What follows is Pakula's methodical deconstruction of American paranoia, where every institution, media, government, corporations, becomes suspect. The director employed innovative cinematography, using wide shots and negative space to make characters appear isolated and vulnerable within hostile environments. The Parallax View revolutionized the conspiracy thriller by making the conspiracy almost incomprehensibly vast. The titular Parallax Corporation doesn't just arrange assassinations, they psychologically profile and recruit the perfect candidates, turning ordinary citizens into unwitting killers. The film's most unsettling sequence involves Frady undergoing psychological evaluation through a bizarre multimedia presentation that feels like brainwashing disguised as job training. The mind-bending twist comes in realizing that Frady himself has been manipulated from the beginning. His investigation isn't exposing the conspiracy, it's part of it. The final revelation that he's been set up as the next patsy creates a devastating sense of hopelessness that was unprecedented in mainstream Hollywood cinema. Pakula's genius lay in reflecting real-world anxieties through genre filmmaking. The mid-70s saw Americans grappling with Vietnam, Watergate, and the Kennedy assassinations. The Parallax View suggested that individual citizens were powerless against vast, invisible forces controlling society from the shadows. The film's technical innovations were equally important. Pakula's collaboration with cinematographer Gordon Willis created a visual language of paranoia, characters literally lost in shadows, dwarfed by architecture, isolated within the frame. This approach influenced countless thrillers, from All the President's Men to modern paranoid classics like The Conversation.
610 proceeding south to airport, carrying 2 passengers. Type H. Repeat type H.
1. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978. Philip Kaufman's remake of Don Siegel's 1956 classic transformed a Cold War allegory into something far more unsettling, a meditation on urban alienation and the loss of human connection. With a $3.5 million budget, the film earned an impressive $24.9 million, proving that intelligent horror could compete with mainstream blockbusters. What made this version revolutionary was its sophisticated approach to body horror and urban dread. Kaufman collaborated with makeup legend Rick Baker to create some of cinema's most disturbing practical effects. Half-formed pod people emerging from flower petals, faces melting and reforming, bodies that look human but feel fundamentally wrong. The San Francisco setting added layers of meaning as the city's fog-shrouded landscape became a character itself, hiding the invasion in plain sight. The mind-bending horror comes from the film's exploration of paranoia as rational response. Donald Sutherland's health inspector, Matthew Bennell, isn't losing his sanity. He's one of the few people sane enough to recognize that humanity is disappearing. The film's most terrifying moments involve characters discovering that loved ones have been replaced, their personalities intact, but their souls completely absent. The ending, featuring one of cinema's most shocking final shots, sealed the film's status as a classic. In an era when most horror films offered at least the possibility of hope, Invasion of the Body Snatchers suggested that some battles simply cannot be won, making it perhaps the most truly terrifying film of the decade. These 5 films proved that the best sci-fi doesn't just predict the future, it reveals uncomfortable truths about the present. Which twisted ending shocked you most? Subscribe for more cinema deep dives.